I want to talk about the usage that we saw in the conference championship, how that's going to impact based on defensive schemes in the Super Bowl, because that's going to help us get an idea for player props, for betting in general, and for DFS, daily fantasy sports, the showdown slates. All that's going to be really important to deep dive on this. And we have the luxury of doing that because there's just two teams, one game, the big hurrah, the final one, the big old bowl, the cereal bowl, the Super Bowl. So let's do it not now, but right now. And let's start at the running back position for usage for this one. We'll start on Cincinnati's side. So what you saw in this game was two running backs used. It was Joe Mixon, as you would expect, right? He sees 75% of the snaps. And Samaje Perine, the former Oklahoma product, I believe, he sees 25% of the snaps. Now, you've been seeing Mixon see 85% of the snaps in the first two, or opportunities in the first two playoff games. And in this last game, you might have thought, oh, wow, Samaje Perine started to carve out a role for himself. Not necessarily. Perine saw 0 touches on the ground. He only saw 14% of the opportunities because he saw 4 targets. Now, you saw him break that long screen touchdown. You saw him have another catch, and the announcers were like, hey, if he would have cut to the outside, he might have scored another touchdown or picked up a first down. But for the most part, it was 3 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown, 41 of which came on that screen touchdown. So 2 catches, 2 yards otherwise. It was still the Joe Mixon show. 86% opportunity share for Mixon in this game, in the conference championship, and basically this whole postseason, would have been number 2 in the NFL during the regular season, only behind Najee Harris. He has been an elite running back, number 3, finished the year in rushing yards. He is still getting all the usage in the world. It's at least worth mentioning, though, that Perine is out there for 25% of the snaps. Perine did run 13 routes, saw above a 30% target rate for running backs like a backup like Perine. That number should be half that number, at best, maybe only 10%, a third of it. So I'm not expecting too much there, but Perine, the only other running back being used. The rookie, Chris Evans, did not play in this game. He's seen a handful of postseason snaps, but I don't expect much from him moving forward. So the ways in which we can act on this is seeing that, okay, you're still getting Joe Mixon running the most routes, 22 routes. He ran 24 in the previous week, so he's still involved in terms of the passing game. They're going to come into this game as underdogs, still having to check the ball down a little bit, facing a cover 2 defense where you can check the ball down. So my first initial thoughts are, yeah, Mixon in the receiving game props start to look okay. I'm not too worried about Samaje Perine. Now, the opposite side of the Super Bowl on the Rams backfield is where things can start to get a little bit hairy, and you're going to see Sony Michel and Cam Akers basically split the snaps in this one, but it's worth pointing out Cam Akers got hurt in the first half, came back in the second half, but lost a significant amount of starts. Cam Akers started that game. He started the game but only played 30 of 77 snaps because of that injury, seeing 39% of the snaps after seeing over 80% of the snaps in a divisional round versus the Bucs. Now, here's the interesting thing. Although Sony Michel played more snaps because of the injury and ended up playing more than the majority of the snaps, 50+% of the snaps, it was still Cam Akers who saw the majority of the opportunities, the majority of the touches on the ground and the targets, right? The carries and the targets. He saw 14 of 26 opportunities compared to Sony Michel's 12 of 26. It's basically a straight split, but he played significantly less snaps. So what does that mean? It means, well, when Cam Akers wasn't in the game and it was only Michel back there, well, they were less reluctant to use him. And now maybe it's just a small sample and there's a case for that to be made. But when Akers was in there, they wanted to prioritize it a little bit more. They wanted to play through him a little bit more, just on 30% of the snaps seeing 14 touches compared to 60% of the snaps for Michel seeing 12 touches. So a takeaway for me there is 30% of the snaps, he still ran more routes, 16 routes run to 11 routes run in this game, in the receiving game for Sony Michel. The takeaway is they're still going to Cam Akers. He started the game. He fumbled twice last week. They went right back to him. As long as Cam Akers is healthy, they're going right back to him. So some people might get excited about the Sony Michel usage. I say hold your horses a little bit, whether it's DFS, people trying to get to him as a leverage play, or player props. Hold your horses. Cam Akers was still the dude they were going to. Now, Jake Funk saw a handful of touches in this game, saw a handful of touches in the wild card round when Cam Akers was limited. That's directly correlated to Cam Akers getting hurt. Daryl Henderson was eligible to return to this game. That could be a sneaky player to watch. If Henderson returns, I don't expect his RB1 usage. I still expect it to be a Cam Akers RB1, RB2 usage split between Henderson and Sony Michel, and probably less for Henderson coming back from an injury. It's the big game. I don't know if you're going to be going with a guy who's a little bit rusty, out of shape maybe. So Henderson, I would expect, if he's active, you don't see much, maybe 5-10 snaps just to be in the Super Bowl, specific plays around him. It's still the Cam Akers show here. I would prefer, if you're talking about backup running backs here, I would actually prefer the role of Samaje Perine to Sony Michel, because I think more people will be excited to get to a Sony Michel because of his usage, and that might push his props up, definitely push his ownership up in daily fantasy sports. Whereas Samaje Perine is probably going to see 25 to 30% of the snaps, just like a Sony Michel. He's probably going to run a couple routes and see 2 to 4 targets, and Michel, sure, Michel might see 6 opportunities, 7, maybe a couple more, but they're going to be on the ground, not not as much usage on a carry compared to a target, more than 2 times the productivity, yardage, and fantasy points there. So something to look out for if you're looking for a backup running back prop or to play in DFS. I prefer P. Ryan right now over Sony Michel. And now before we transition to the most important part, you're going to want to stay around. Wide receivers, there's so many to talk about here. There's 9 wide receivers, believe it or not, for these 2 games that at least saw usage in the conference championship from these teams. I'll let you know about the sponsor of the program. This is a big one because of the Super Bowl. A lot of you are already in on this, but be sure to check the boards. PrizePicks.com. We've been talking about PrizePicks.com a lot. If you use the code SAL on PrizePicks.com, it's player props. The perfect time to be betting, especially if you're in New York, California, Texas, some spots where a lot of stuff might not be legal yet. I'm in Texas myself, especially California. This is legal there. It's player prop based. Take the over-under on player props. If you use that code SAL, you get a free bet up to $100. You can use it for the Super Bowl. You can use it for some other sports once the Super Bowl is over, but take advantage of it. They're going to be having promotions, props that are basically a free bet, so be sure to try it. Not just you, but tell the people you're at your Super Bowl party with, your friend, your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle. The code SAL, free bet up to $100 instantly in your account, so be sure to check it out. It's linked in the description. Code SAL, PrizePicks.com. So now we can go to the wide receivers. Let's start with Cincinnati. Cincinnati, the 3 wide receiver sets are the exact same. It is Jamar Chase on the outside, T. Higgins on the outside, and Tyler Boyd in the slot. Now, they did use Mike Thomas for 2 snaps. He ran 1 route in this game. Didn't see anything. He's now in the postseason. Basically played like 5 snaps, ran a couple of routes, no usage. They used Trent Taylor for 1 snap and 1 route. That's the only other wide receiver usage. We know the wide receiver usage here. It is these 3 wide receivers. Now, the one thing that I think is important to point out, like Jamar Chase played the most snaps, ran the most routes. T. Higgins now has 199 yards in the last 2 postseason games. Actually leads the team with 18 targets over that time, just like he led the team in targets per game, target share per game in the regular season. Quietly, Jamar Chase stole the show as the rookie All-Pro. T. Higgins, still a very solid guy. You saw that last week, breaking 100 yards. Another interesting fact on Jamar Chase for player props, he's seen a rushing attempt in every game, had 3 yards last week, had 2 rushing attempts in the wild card round, had a rushing attempt in the divisional round. So if you're talking about just his overall rushing yards, if they set it at like a half a rushing yard, he's going to have an opportunity, just has to not get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. So that's something to point out. We'll talk about the matchups as the week goes on. We have a lot of time to do that, so we're going to have content for the Super Bowl almost every single day on this channel over the next week and a half. But he has now had 100-plus yards or a touchdown in his first 3 playoff starts, just absolutely dominating his All-Pro rookie season. The other guy to talk about, though, is the guy out of the slot. He played 70% of the snaps in the championship game, and that's Tyler Boyd. Now, Tyler Boyd was this guy that we were saying he's scoring a touchdown every week. He had the controversial touchdown in the wild card round against the Raiders when they blew the whistle, right? There's things there with Tyler Boyd, but once you stop scoring touchdowns, he's not going to be that productive. But this is a matchup where a lot of that can change. Because let's look at these matchups they've had. In the first round of the playoffs, they played the Raiders. The Raiders famously play a 1-high safety, meaning that you're going to have a 1-on-1 matchup somewhere on the outside for a Jamar Chase or a T. Higgins. Chase took advantage of it in that game. Higgins actually had 2 opportunities, and he dropped those 2 opportunities. And then the next week, what do you get out there? You get a matchup against the Tennessee Titans, who have terrible outside cornerback play. I mean, terrible outside cornerback play. So what do? Well, you attack their outside corners. Jamar Chase over 100 yards again. T. Higgins goes for like 80 yards in the first half in that one, has 90-plus yards overall in the game, right? So these are the matchups you're taking advantage of. And then this past week against the Kansas City Chiefs, what is the matchup? Well, the matchup is they're shadowing Jamar Chase on the outside. In the slot, you have L'Jarius Sneed, who is one of the best slot cornerbacks we've seen in the league. He's probably their best cornerback on that team, the healthiest too as well over the past month or so, with Ward being banged up, Fenton coming back from injury for the Chiefs in that game. So you get this matchup where it's tough for Tyler Boyd. Jamar Chase is seeing shadow coverage over top, and T. Higgins is the guy who's getting isolated one-on-ones. And what does he do? He goes over 100 yards in that game, and he has the best game for the Bengals. So none of these spots were the favor of Tyler Boyd, either tough matchup or scheme to outside production. This matchup is one where we should see Tyler Boyd have his best performance yet, not just in targets, maybe some downfield usage, but overall yardage and receptions. I like his prompts this week. I'll be interested in playing him in DFS, mainly, and we can talk more on this as the week goes on, mainly because the Rams historically play 2 high safeties. When you play 2 high safeties, tight ends, running back passes out of the backfield, and these underneath routes to a Tyler Boyd are easier to complete and easier to find success. The 49ers last week, they did that. Brandon Ayuk had a nice game over the middle of the field primarily. George Kittle over the middle of the field primarily. They were able to do that last week. That's what the Rams will give up. They'll give up those passes, and they'll say, we're just not going to let you beat us deep. We'll wait for you to make a mistake on your end. Now, the Rams wide receivers, you saw the same 3 wide receiver sets, but this is now back-to-back weeks where you're seeing very good usage. I'm talking 88 to 90% of the snaps for Van Jefferson after about a month stretch of where his usage dropped. They went to a very 2 tight end sets. The reason for that is Tyler Higbee got hurt in that game. They couldn't go to 2 tight end sets. They only had 1 tight end active in Kendall Blanton, right? They were using Ben Skowronek basically as a de facto tight end, running 10 routes, and he operated as the wide receiver 4, ran 10 routes. He's now ran 12 routes and seen 2 targets, no receptions in the postseason. He's not great. He's a bigger body guy guy dropped what would have been a touchdown in this game, though. But other than him, they ran their same 3 wide receivers. They put Cooper Kupp in the slot for 70+% of the snaps. A man in Cooper Kupp who was just elite. He had like 70 yards after the catch. It was just unreal, right? 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. Just continues to dominate. They put Van Jefferson on the outside in 3 wide receiver sets because they only had 1 tight end active. And then they put Odell on the other outside. So Jefferson's snaps are coming up. He saw 5 targets. 3 of those led the team 20+ yards down the field. So he's kind of your boomer bust guy. We all know that. He's now been under this 2.5 reception prop for like 6 of his last 7 games. So that's been something to hammer. We'll see if the book's still opening at that. Keep an eye on that. But his deep ball, his overall, what is his longest reception in this game? If they give you somewhere in the upper teens or low 20s, like an 18 or a 23, it might be worth looking at maybe taking an over on that because everything he's getting targeted is basically downfield. He's not getting a lot of volume, but it is downfield. And now from an Odell Beckham Jr. usage standpoint, this was amazing. We haven't seen this in a really long time. They just said, Odell, you go on the outside. Odell played 90+% of his snaps on the outside, only 7% of the snaps in the slot. He doesn't do that often, right? He transitions into the slot 20-30% of the snaps. He ran on the outside as an X receiver. And they said, just run your go routes. You're going to have one-on-one matchups because of Cooper Kupp and the way they're playing him. Go run your routes. What does he do? He goes over 100 yards. He sees double-digit targets. He looks fantastic. He has 19 targets in the last 2 weeks for this team. The usage for Odell in that game was unbelievable. It was great. I think he transitions into the slot a little bit more in the Super Bowl. We can talk again on that more as he faces a team where he can get yours in the slot a little bit more. But they put him on the outside as the X. We know he can do that. They're continuing to have trust in him. Stafford is having trust. You finally saw Odell not just get these short area targets, but take advantage of a one-on-one matchup downfield. We know he has that juice in him. That is good to see. So that's kind of where you're at on the wide receivers. And the quick and dirty on the tight ends is both these tight ends got hurt. Both starting tight ends got hurt in the early first half of the games, right? A knee injury carted off for CJ Uzomah. Tyler Higbee gets hurt, doesn't come back. Track those injury statuses, of course. We can talk about what the fill-in opportunities were. The overall change of the offense, right? If you start with the Rams side of this, they changed the offense by going more 3 wide receiver sets, right? They put Ben Skowronek out there as a de facto tight end on some plays. He's a wide receiver 4 out of Notre Dame, but a de facto tight end. And the tight end who saw usage was the only tight end left in the roster. There's no Bryson Hopkins out there. There's no Tyler Higbee, so it was Kendall Blanton. Kendall Blanton, who came out of Missouri in 2019 as an undrafted free agent weighing over 260 pounds, not known to be a nimble tight end. And what does he do? He has 5 catches, 57 yards. 51 of those yards, I've had a tweet, 51 of those 57 yards, almost 90%, were after the catch. He was nimble. He was getting wide receiver screens. Schemed production is good to see. I'm going to like that. He's going to be expensive on the showdown slate for DFS, but it's fine. If people don't want to play him, if there's no Higbee, they use this tight end, and they're going to scheme him production, and he has a massive advantage at 6'6" and 250 pounds, and he looked nimble. Other than that, no other tight ends were used for the Rams. On the opposite side of this one, you saw a familiar name, and that familiar name was Drew Sample. For some of us, if you're in the streets, he played 62 snaps in this game. 62 of 69 snaps was 90% of the snaps, and he ended up going out there. He ran the 4th most routes. You had the top 3 receivers for the Bengals, and then you had number 4, Drew Sample. He ran around 25, 26 routes in this game. Had 2 targets, caught a short target. That was it, but the usage was there. Uzomah's injury didn't look good. As I record this, we don't have any news on it, but he got carted off. They're saying it was a knee injury. Not good. It did not look good either, so track that. If Uzomah's back, I expect Uzomah, if he's fully healthy in 2 weeks, to be the dude, right? Drew Sample goes back to his role of before this conference championship, playing 28% of the snaps, only running 13 routes in 2 games and seeing no targets. But if he's in there, he's going to run routes. I don't think they work through him all that much, but again, just like I said about Tyler Boyd, they're not going to prioritize Drew Sample, but he might just have some of these releases. He's going to be in there to maybe chip block a little bit off the line of scrimmage, like you see George Kittle do a lot for a bad offensive line of the Bengals, but just like I said about Tyler Boyd, underneath routes, quick passes, the 2 high safeties leave the middle of the field open. Maybe Sample starts to get some stuff if there's no Uzomah. Not an outstanding athlete. He is sure-handed, so if targets go his way, you shouldn't expect drops. At least worth mentioning there. Drew Sample is somebody that can be a sneaky, if his prop is set at 1.5 receptions, a sneaky over in that standpoint. Only other guy to mention is Mitchell Wilcox. He's a tight end on the Bengals as well. He only played because you saw no CJ Uzomah out there. If Uzomah's back, nothing for Wilcox. Wilcox played 18 snaps. He blocked on 16 of them. This is a bad offensive line. He was basically a glorified blocker in there. He ran 2 routes. On those 2 routes, he didn't see a target, so you're going to get a blocker here. It's either going to be CJ Uzomah or Drew Sample, depending on injury. And then it's going to be Kendall Blanton or Tyler Higbee, depending on injury. Maybe, and you probably should expect the Rams to call up a tight end if a sign or call up from a practice squad, if there is no Tyler Higbee in this one. Has 2 weeks to recover. We'll see what the news is there. But that's the usage. That's usage from the conference championship, from the postseason so far. Maybe a little bit of a look ahead in this one about how some players can get better usage than we've seen, how some things can shift. But that's where it's at. That's what we should expect from these players. It's very interesting to see guys like Odell line up just primarily as the X receiver on the outside. Interesting to see how much usage Mixon saw, even though on the TV broadcast it seemed like P. Ryan was out there a lot more. Wasn't. 25% of the snaps, things like that. So hopefully this starts to clear things up as you start to get even deeper into the research here on this channel. I'm excited for the Super Bowl. Of course I am. There's going to be content like every single day for player props, for outright bets, for in general just fun props, for DFS, for everything you can possibly think of, matchups, and right here the usage for the Super Bowl. So Cincinnati Bengals, Los Angeles Rams, thank you for tuning in. Use that code SAL and tell your friend to tell a friend. Use the code SAL, you get a free bet up $200 on prizepicks.com. All linked down below as well to help you out there. Subscribe before you go if you're interested in this channel and this content. More to come, and I'll see you when I see you again. I'll see you in that next one.